Media fact-checker. Childcare worker convicted of indecent treatment of child, acquitted of rape charges in Queensland. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Arvinder Singh, 43, a Fiji citizen, was accused of digitally raping a child at a Queensland childcare centre in 2022. Singh pleaded not guilty to charges of rape and indecent treatment of a child under his care. The jury found Singh not guilty of rape but guilty of one count of indecent treatment of a child under his care. Singh was sentenced to 20 months in jail, with half, 10 months, suspended before deportation to Fiji. Singh worked at a childcare centre on a visa that was cancelled after charges were filed in 2022. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Singh was deported before his court date in 2025, while ABC clarifies he was deported in July 2025 after a month in immigration detention and returned voluntarily in February 2026. News Kamau implies Singh was deported in 2025 and then returned in 2026, but ABC specifies he was detained in May 2025 and deported in July 2025 before voluntarily returning in February 2026. News Kamau does not mention the victim's parents' emotional state during testimony, while ABC describes them as tears falling, hands shaking. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia faces fuel shortages amid global supply disruptions and government responses. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Energy Minister Chris Bowen announced a 6-month relaxation of diesel standards, flashpoint lowered from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius, to increase supply, reported in Guardian and ABC. Hundreds of service stations across Australia are without at least one type of fuel, with NSW reporting 164 stations without diesel and 289 without at least one fuel type, Guardian, ABC. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack regular unleaded petrol, Guardian, ABC. In Victoria, 162 stations have shortages of one or more fuel types, Guardian, ABC. 6 fuel shipments to Australia were cancelled in April, with some replaced by alternate sources, Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Bowen declined to share statistics for Western Australia, NT, SA, and Tasmania, while ABC provides specific numbers for these states: 162 in Victoria, 46 in SA, 6 in WA, 1 in Tasmania. The Guardian reports Bowen said rationing is a long way off, while ABC does not quote this exact phrasing but focuses more on coordination efforts. The Guardian mentions Bowen did not share exact timing for awareness of cancelled shipments, while ABC does not address this ambiguity. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-led Middle East conflict escalation and global response over Strait of Hormuz and energy infrastructure attacks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. European leaders, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Japan issued a joint statement condemning Iran for attacks on commercial shipping vessels and civilian energy facilities, including the Strait of Hormuz closure. Iran retaliated against an Israeli strike on its South Pars natural gas field by attacking a major Qatari LNG facility, Ras Laffan, in Qatar, causing 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity to be eliminated, valued at $20 billion, 28 billion Australian dollars. Brent crude oil price briefly spiked above $119 per barrel on Thursday due to escalating tensions. Japanese Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi visited Donald Trump at the White House, the first major ally leader to do so since Trump demanded assistance for the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Foreign Minister Said Abbas Araghchi vowed retaliation with zero restraint if civilian infrastructure is struck again. But not all outlets told the same story. Source SMH reports US media contradicted Trump's claim that he told Netanyahu don't do that about the South Pars strike, stating Washington was aware of and supported the Israeli attack in advance. No contradictions found between Thij and SMH beyond redundant reporting. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian Muslims celebrate Eid and Nowruz amid Middle East war and rising Islamophobia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Eid al-Fitr and Nowruz celebrations are taking place in Australia this weekend, Eid on Friday, Nowruz on Saturday. Heidelberg Mosque in Melbourne expects 1,500 worshippers for Eid prayers. Lokemba Mosque in Sydney expects 50,000 attendees for Eid prayers. Security at Lokemba Mosque has been increased to levels not seen since the 2005 Cronulla riots. The 7th anniversary of the Christchurch massacre is being remembered during Eid celebrations. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Lokemba Mosque expecting 50,000 attendees, but SBS does not provide this specific number or detail. The Guardian states Lokemba Mosque security increase is due to Islamophobic incidents and political rhetoric, while SBS does not elaborate on causes. The Guardian provides specific quotes from Inaz Janif, Imam El-Zokm, and Gamal Kir about personal experiences and political blame, which SBS omits. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia and NATO allies for refusing to assist in Iran war and Strait of Hormuz blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump publicly stated on social media that the US no longer need or desire NATO countries' assistance in the Iran war, writing "We never did." Guardian, The Age, SMH, News.com.au, ABC. Trump named Australia, Japan, South Korea, and NATO as countries whose help the US no longer requires, declaring "We do not need the help of anyone." Guardian, The Age, SMH, News.com.au, ABC. Australia's Transport Minister Catherine King confirmed Australia would not send a ship to the Strait of Hormuz, Guardian, ABC. The Strait of Hormuz blockade by Iran has caused global oil supply disruptions, leading to surging fuel prices in Australia, Guardian, ABC. The International Energy Agency warned the Iran conflict is the greatest threat to global energy supply in history of the world, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report Trump explicitly named Australia in his social media outburst, while News.com.au states Trump had not mentioned Australia in his earlier requests for help. The Guardian reports Trump said, "I was very surprised Australia declined to send troops," but The Age and ABC do not include this specific quote. The Guardian states Trump did not answer when asked what Australia had said no to, while The Age and ABC do not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Global oil crisis triggered by Middle East conflict and Strait of Hormuz blockage. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The International Energy Agency, IEA, issued a global warning on Friday urging governments to reduce oil demand through measures like working from home, cutting speed limits by 10 km per hour, and avoiding air travel due to the Middle East conflict. The IEA released 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves on March 14, marking the largest stock draw in its history to offset the oil supply disruption. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20 million barrels of crude oil and oil products typically pass daily, has seen shipping reduced to a trickle due to the conflict between Israel and Iran. IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol stated that the war in the Middle East is creating the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market and warned that impacts will worsen without a swift resolution. Australia's Energy Minister Chris Bowen met with state counterparts on Friday and agreed to meet regularly to ensure fuel supply, but stated fuel rationing is not being contemplated in the immediate future. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions that several countries have restricted travel for public officials and started campaigns to reduce energy consumption, but this detail is not mentioned in the other sources. The Guardian states that the US lacks a clear exit strategy from the conflict, while the other sources do not explicitly address this point. The Guardian highlights that European nations are gutting climate action policies to offset the energy crunch, a claim not supported or mentioned in the other sources. This story was covered by The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 4 Jewish ambulances set ablaze in anti-Semitic hate crime in London's Golders Green. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 ambulances belonging to Hatzola Northwest were set on fire in Golders Green, London, on Monday morning, 1:45 a.m. local time. The fires were treated by police as an anti-Semitic hate crime, with explosions caused by oxygen tanks on board the ambulances. 3 suspects, seen in masked footage, remain at large. Police believe they are still active in the investigation. The London Fire Brigade dispatched 6 fire engines and 40 firefighters to the scene, with explosions breaking windows in adjacent flats. No injuries were reported, and the fires were extinguished by 3:06 a.m. Nearby houses were evacuated as a precaution. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 frames the attack as part of a global erosion of humanity tied to the Israel-Palestine war, while ABC and Newscomau focus solely on the local anti-Semitic crime without broader geopolitical context. Guardian Article 5 states Jacob Lipton claims UK political leaders' actions, e.g., Labour's genocide resolution, have exacerbated animosity, but no other source directly links the attack to these political moves. Guardian Article 1 and Article 5 emphasise the attack's symbolic targeting of Jewish life and community, while Newscomau and ABC frame it primarily as a criminal act with no explicit ideological motivation beyond antisemitism. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Venezuela wins first World Baseball Classic title by defeating the USA in a politically charged final. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Venezuela defeated the United States 3-2 in the World Baseball Classic final on Tuesday night at Miami's Lone Depot Park. Eugenio Suarez drove in the winning run with an RBI double in the top of the 9th inning. Daniel Palencia struck out Roman Anthony with a 100 mph fastball for the final out in the 9th inning. The game was played before a sold-out crowd of 36,190 at Lone Depot Park in Miami. Venezuela's Michael Garcia led the tournament with 10 hits and a .385 batting average. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Trump's Truth Social post included number 51 and statehood, but ABC does not mention Trump's social media activity. The Guardian states the US lineup did not advance a runner past second through 7 full innings, while ABC does not specify this detail. The Guardian notes Venezuela's Eduardo Rodriguez and Nolan McLean worked scoreless first and second innings, but ABC does not mention this. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of married at first sight expert Mel Schilling from colon cancer at 54. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday, aged 54, from colon cancer that spread to her brain. Schilling was diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023 and underwent surgery to remove a 5 cm tumor. In February 2024, a routine scan revealed small nodules in her lungs indicating metastasis. Schilling underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 2 years before announcing her cancer had spread to her brain in March 2026. She was a psychologist with a Bachelor of Arts and graduate diploma in psychology, practicing for over 20 years. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC describe her cancer as colon cancer, but ABC also notes it was a bowel cancer diagnosis. Colon cancer is a type of bowel cancer, so this is not a contradiction but ABC's broader classification. No contradictions found between sources on core factual claims like dates, names, or key events. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Olislagers wins silver in women's high jump at World Athletics Indoor Championships 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Olislagers won silver in the women's high jump at the World Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland. Yaroslava Mahuchik won gold with a clearance of 2.01 meters. Olislagers, Yulia Levchenko, Ukraine, and Angelina Topic, Serbia, shared silver after all clearing 1.99 meters. Olislagers cleared 1.99 meters on her first attempt, equaling her indoor personal best. Eleanor Patterson, Australia, finished 7th with a clearance of 1.93 meters. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Olislagers was a little surprised to be among the top 4, while ABC does not mention this specific reaction. The Guardian describes Eleanor Patterson's performance as suffering early failures, while ABC does not use this phrasing. The Guardian notes Peter Boll had raced indoors only twice in his life before the event, while ABC does not specify this exact detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's economic risks from Iran-US conflict and domestic political fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Barry Cassidy and Tony Barry are co-hosting a Guardian podcast analysing economic risks. The RBA has raised the cash rate as part of economic policy responses. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie has publicly criticised US President Trump's Iran war stance. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is described as opening the door for a potential recession. The article discusses the fuel crisis and its economic fallout in Australia. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coronial inquest into Bradley Murdoch's death and his refusal to disclose Peter Falconio's remains. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bradley Murdoch was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005 for the murder of Peter Falconio and attempted kidnapping of Joanne Lees, with a non-parole period of 28 years. Murdoch died from stage 4 cancer, throat cancer, in Alice Springs Hospital's palliative care unit on July 16, 2025, 22 years into his sentence. Police made 2 attempts to convince Murdoch to reveal Falconio's remains in the weeks before his death, one at Alice Springs Correctional Center on June 25, 2025, and another in palliative care days before his death. Murdoch refused to watch a video of Falconio's parents, recorded with UK police, during the June 25 visit and yelled at police to get out during the palliative care visit. A $500,000 reward remains for information leading to Falconio's remains, which have never been found despite Murdoch's conviction for his murder. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Murdoch's palliative care visit lasted 30 seconds with no interaction, while The Guardian describes him yelling at police to get out during the visit. ABC emphasizes occasional delays in medical treatment were acknowledged but insists no missed opportunity for an earlier diagnosis, whereas The Guardian highlights Murdoch's refusal of radiotherapy and his declaration to die naturally as potential factors in his treatment. ABC does not mention Murdoch's declaration to die naturally in the event of a medical emergency, which The Guardian explicitly reports. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian man charged with murder after elderly body found near Jung Highway. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Robert Beck, 49, from Minyip, is charged with murder in connection with the death of an elderly man, believed to be in his 80s, found near the intersection of Henty HWY and Finlayson Road in Jung, Victoria, on Monday morning at approximately 9:15 a.m. The deceased sustained 24 injuries according to police forensic evidence. Beck was arrested on Monday evening in Horsham after police found him behaving erratically and in possession of a knife on Firebrace St. He was taken to hospital and later charged by detectives from the homicide squad the following day. Beck has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder, which were disclosed to police and mentioned in court. Magistrate Timothy Hoare granted police an 8-week extension, instead of the requested 12 weeks, to prepare evidence, citing complex forensic work including multiple crime scenes, items for analysis, and mobile phones to examine. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Dementia prevention via diet and genetic influences on brain health. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Mind Diet, Mediterranean-diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, is linked to lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, with strong evidence supporting its neuroprotective effects. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors that could prevent or delay 45% of dementia cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7%, hearing loss, 7%, depression, 3%, and low social contact in old age, 5%. The Mind Diet emphasizes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, and oily fish, boosting vitamins, carotenoids, and flavonoids believed to protect the brain from oxidative stress and inflammation. A 2019 study led by Scientia professor Karin Arnsti found that people following the Mind Diet had a 19% reduced odds of developing mild cognitive impairment or dementia. The APOE4 gene variant, present in about 25% of people, increases dementia risk and is linked to cholesterol and fat transport issues in the brain. But not all outlets told the same story. Both sources mention the Mind Diet's benefits but do not provide contradictory details. The only nuance is the genetic exception for APOE4 carriers eating unprocessed meat, which is not a contradiction but an exception to general advice. The articles do not contradict each other on any factual claim, they are nearly verbatim and focus on the same studies and expert opinions. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kangaroo Island Council's proposed feral cat eradication and pet cat ban. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kangaroo Island Council is considering a blanket ban on new pet cats as part of a feral cat eradication project. Mayor Michael Pengelly supports a last cat policy to rid Kangaroo Island of feral cats and prevent new introductions. The council aims to eradicate feral cats by 2030, making it one of the world's largest inhabited islands free of feral cats. Feral cats have caused a $12 million annual decline in sheep production due to toxoplasmosis, according to Mayor Pengelly and Jack Goff. The Dudley Peninsula project has removed 2,800 cats, leaving around 150 remaining, with a 95% reduction expected this winter. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the council is not that far advanced in implementing the last cat policy, while ABC describes it as an idea the current council would like to see put in place without specifying advancement. News Kamau mentions the policy could take up to 30 years to implement, while ABC does not specify a timeline beyond the 2030 eradication goal. News Kamau emphasizes the council's goal is to totally strip the island of the invasive species by 2030, while ABC focuses more on the incredibly ambitious nature of the Dudley Peninsula project as a quarter of the island. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump threatens to deploy ICE agents to US airports during DHS funding shutdown. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to deploy ICE agents to US airports starting Monday, March 24, 2024, if Democrats did not agree to DHS funding, ABC, Guardian 1 and 3, ABC 4. The partial government shutdown began on February 14, 2024, and is in its 36th day as of March 2024, ABC, Guardian 1 and 3. More than 400 TSA workers have quit since the shutdown began, ABC, Guardian 1 and 2, ABC 4. TSA officers are missing paychecks, with workers set to miss their second full paycheck on March 27, 2024, ABC, Guardian 1 and 5. ICE agents are not specifically trained for airport security, which is TSA's domain, ABC, Guardian 1 and 3, Guardian 5. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states that more than 400 TSA workers have quit, while Guardian 3 mentions at least 366 TSA agents have quit, ABC versus Guardian 3. Guardian 1 and Guardian 2 both report that ICE agents would begin deployment on Monday, March 24, 2024, but Guardian 3 states Trump threatened deployment on Monday if Democrats did not agree to funding, implying a conditional deployment rather than a definitive start date. ABC 4 mentions that Homan said he would have a plan by the end of Sunday, March 23, for deployment, while Guardian 1 and Guardian 2 report that details were still being finalized on Sunday, March 23. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ICE detains Canadian mother and autistic daughter in Texas despite valid documents. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tanya Warner, 47, and her 7-year-old autistic daughter Ayla Lucas were detained by ICE in Texas on March 14, 2025, after being stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint in Sarita, Texas, while driving home from a baby shower in Raymondville, Texas. Both Tanya Warner and Ayla Lucas are Canadian citizens. Warner is originally from British Columbia and moved to the US in 2021 to marry Edward Warner, a US citizen, living in Kingsville, Texas. ICE agents took Tanya Warner and Ayla Lucas for fingerprinting at the checkpoint, and neither returned. They were initially held at the Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas, before being transferred to the Dilley Immigration Processing Center in South Texas. Tanya Warner holds a Texas driver's license, a work visa valid until 2030, and a social security card, all described as legally valid by family members and Edward Warner. Global Affairs Canada acknowledged multiple cases of Canadians detained in U.S. immigration-related detention and stated consular officials advocate for Canadian citizens but cannot exempt them from local legal processes. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the family was initially held at Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas, while Article 2 confirms this but adds they were moved to Dilley early on Friday, which Article 1 does not mention. Article 1 does not mention Tanya Warner's direct quote about avoiding checkpoints and lying low due to Trump's policies, which Article 2 prominently includes. Article 1 does not describe the handcuffing of children at Rio Grande Valley Central, which Article 2 explicitly states occurred. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Boating accident off Tasmania's northwest coast leaves 1 dead, 3 rescued after capsizing. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 people, 3 adults, ages 27, 33, and a 6-year-old child left the Montague boat ramp west of Smithton at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday for a fishing trip. The boat capsized around 9 p.m. on Saturday, throwing all 4 into the water off Tasmania's far northwest coast near Robbins Island. 3 survivors, 27-year-old woman, 33-year-old man, and the 6-year-old child, were rescued about 1 p.m. on Sunday near Big Stony Island, 16 hours after the incident. All 3 rescued individuals were wearing life jackets and suffered no injuries. They were taken to Northwest Regional Hospital for observation. The missing 35-year-old man's body was found on Monday on the eastern side of Robbins Island. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the boat capsized while News Kamau and ABC, Article 2, describe it as broke up or broken up, no consensus on exact cause. ABC, Article 1, says the 35-year-old was understood to have not been wearing a life jacket initially, but ABC, Article 2, later clarifies he had a life jacket on at one point, implying inconsistency in reporting. News Kamau mentions the rescued trio were floating in the ocean before rescue, while ABC does not specify their exact condition upon discovery. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2 men charged in fatal Bruce Highway head-on crash involving stolen truck. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 26-year-old Caboolture man named Andre Roberts died after a head-on collision on the Bruce Highway near Burpengary on February 17 at approximately 10:30 p.m. A 46-year-old Redcliffe man was charged with 1 count of manslaughter and multiple theft-related charges, including 4 counts of entering premises to commit theft, 3 counts of stealing, 2 counts of receiving tainted property, and 1 count of unlawful use of a motor vehicle. A 42-year-old Narangba man was charged with 1 count of manslaughter and 1 count of dangerous operation of a vehicle causing grievous bodily harm. The Isuzu truck involved in the crash was allegedly stolen from a Hemant business and was being followed by a Ford Ranger in the moments leading up to the crash. The Redcliffe man, 46, was allegedly driving the Isuzu truck, and the Narangba man, 42, was allegedly driving the Ford Ranger. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the crash occurred on the northbound lanes of the Bruce Highway at Burpengary, while ABC does not specify the direction but mentions the Deception Bay Road exit. News Kamau does not mention the involvement of multiple vehicles chasing the truck before the crash, which ABC details as part of Detective Inspector Harbison's statement. News Kamau does not mention the specific charges of the 49-year-old and 36-year-old Redcliffe men related to the stolen truck, which ABC includes as part of the February 23 charges. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Italian PM Giorgia Meloni faces referendum defeat on judiciary reform. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Giorgia Meloni's government proposed a referendum to reform Italy's judiciary, separating judges and prosecutors and altering the Superior Council of the Judiciary, CSM. The referendum was held over 2 days, Sunday through Monday, with 53.8 to 54% of voters rejecting the reform and 46 to 46.2% supporting it. Turnout reached a record 58.5%, Guardian, or nearly 59%, ABC, higher than expected forecasts. Giorgia Meloni acknowledged defeat, stating the Italians have decided and pledged to move forward with responsibility and respect. The referendum campaign featured inflammatory rhetoric from Meloni and her ministers against the judiciary, framing it as a political issue. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports turnout at 58.5%, Interior Ministry data, while ABC states it was nearly 59%, no official source cited. The Guardian specifies 53.8% voted no, Opinio Rai data, but ABC rounds to almost 54% without citing the exact source. The Guardian attributes the 61% no vote among 18 to 34-year-olds to Opinio Rai data, while ABC does not mention youth turnout breakdowns. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government response to fuel crisis caused by Middle East conflict and Strait of Hormuz blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese is convening a national cabinet meeting on Thursday, 2024 date unspecified, to coordinate a national response to the fuel crisis triggered by the US-Israel strikes on Iran and ongoing Middle East conflict. The federal government has released nearly 1/5, 20%, of Australia's domestic petrol and diesel reserves to address shortages, with 100 million litres month injected into the market for 60 days by relaxing fuel standards. The Strait of Hormuz carries about 20% of global oil supply, and its blockade by Iran has disrupted Australian fuel shipments, with at least 6 ships destined for Australia cancelled due to the conflict. Fuel prices have risen sharply globally since Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, with Australian farmers and truckers reporting shortages in rural regional areas. Energy Minister Chris Bowen stated Australia's fuel supply remains very solid, with all deliveries arriving as expected so far, despite Strait of Hormuz risks. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Albanese explicitly blamed massive surge in demand for shortages, while Thij and Guardian emphasize supply chain disruptions and Strait of Hormuz risks as primary causes. Guardian and ABC report the government is doubling penalties for fuel companies to $100 million per offence, but News Kamau does not mention this legislative plan. Thij and SMH report the coalition is considering lifting Russian fertilizer sanctions to avoid food inflation, but News Kamau and ABC do not mention this policy proposal. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff strike over rejected pay and conditions agreement. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. ABC staff voted 60% no to the latest Enterprise Bargaining Agreement (EBA) offer, with 75.6% of eligible staff participating. ABC Articles 1 and 2, News Kamau, Guardian. The rejected pay offer included a 3.5% pay rise in the first year and 3.25% in the subsequent 2 years, plus a $1,000 one-off bonus for ongoing and fixed-term staff. ABC Articles 1 and 2, Guardian. The 24-hour strike began at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, the 11th of July, 2024, affecting flagship programs like 7.30 a.m., p.m., The World Today, and Radio National Breakfast. ABC Article 1, Guardian. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks apologised to audiences and staff for the strike, calling it very unfortunate. ABC Article 1, Guardian. The strike was triggered after staff were 395 votes short of the majority required to accept the offer. ABC Article 2, News Kamau. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states the $1,000 bonus was for all ongoing and fixed-term staff covered by the EBA, while News Kamau and Guardian imply the bonus excluded casual staff, not explicitly contradicted but omitted in some sources. ABC Article 2 claims Marks said the offer was above inflation for some workers, but unions and Guardian state the offer was below inflation, 3.5% vs 3.8% inflation. News Kamau reports 40% of staff voted in favour, while ABC Articles 1 and 2 report 60% voted no, implied 40% yes. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian public and government response to US-Israel military strikes on Iran and regional escalation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Resolve Political Monitor survey, last week, found 61% of Australians want the country to stay out of the US-Israel war against Iran, with only 13% supporting involvement. 47% of Australians support regime change in Tehran, while 9% want the current Iranian government to remain in place. Thij SMH. An Iranian projectile struck near Australia's Al Minhad airbase in the UAE on Wednesday, causing a fire that damaged an accommodation block and a medical facility. No Australian personnel were injured. Thij SMH. The average price of petrol in Australia has surged over $2 a litre since the war began, and oil tanker passage through the Strait of Hormuz has virtually stopped. Thij SMH. 85% of Australians are concerned about the war's impact on the cost of living. Thij SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. Thij SMH report 47% of Australians support regime change in Tehran, but Guardian does not provide this specific statistic. Thij SMH state 29% of Australians endorsed the government's support for US-Israeli strikes, while Guardian's poll shows only 26% approve of the US-Israel war on Iran. Thij SMH report 39% backed sending missiles to the UAE, But Guardian states only 32% backed the government's move to send missiles and personnel. This story was covered by The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Homicide investigation and manslaughter charge in Perth's Banksia Grove over a woman's death. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 42-year-old woman was found unresponsive at a home in Banksia Grove, Perth's northern suburbs, on Thursday morning around 9 a.m. The woman was declared dead at the scene by paramedics after being unresponsive. The incident occurred on Mayerley Bend, Banksia Grove. A man in his 40s was assisting police with inquiries, Article 1, and later charged, Article 2. Police received the initial report around 9 a.m. on Thursday. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states a man in his 40s is assisting police, while Article 2 specifies a 47-year-old man was arrested and charged. Article 1 does not mention charges or an arrest, while Article 2 states the man was charged with manslaughter. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke heckled at Lokemba Mosque Eid event. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke attended Eid prayers at Lokemba Mosque in Sydney on the 10th of April, 2024 to mark the end of Ramadan. Protesters at the mosque shouted phrases including genocide supporters, shame, disgrace, and get them out of here during the event. A 33-year-old man was removed from the mosque by police after being identified as a heckler. He was given a move-on direction and released without charge. Lebanese Muslim Association Secretary Gamal Kir delivered a statement defending the invitation of Albanese and Burke, arguing engagement with government strengthens community advocacy. Israel's strikes in Lebanon had killed at least 912 people, including 111 children, and wounded 2,221 others as of the event date, per Lebanese Health Ministry. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and SMH report protesters shouted genocide supporters, but the ABC only reports genocide supporters as a shout from one source without explicit confirmation from multiple sources. The Guardian states Albanese made a hasty exit avoiding a crowd on the mosque steps, while the SMH describes Albanese being chased by protesters after escaping via a back door. The SMH claims Albanese was initially supposed to give a speech but organisers changed their mind, while The Guardian and ABC do not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nigel Farage's Cameo platform controversies and political alignment with extremist content. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nigel Farage earned at least £374,893 from Cameo videos over 5 years, charging £79 per video at his most recent rate. Farage recorded Cameo videos for a Canadian white supremacist group and a man jailed for rioting, 16-month sentence. Farage's Cameo videos included references to antisemitic conspiracy theories, misogynistic remarks about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and extremist slogans like Up the Rhodesia. Farage withdrew from Cameo on Thursday, the 30th of April, citing security concerns after exposure by The Guardian. Reform UK's spokesperson stated Farage's Cameo videos should not be treated as political statements or campaign activity. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Farage withdrew from Cameo due to security concerns, while Article 2 does not mention this reason and focuses on the extremist content. Article 1 claims Farage earned over £1 million in a year from various activities, but Articles 2 and 3 only confirm £374,893 from Cameo alone. Article 3 describes Farage's Cameo videos as public statements due to their shareable nature, contradicting Reform UK's official statement that they are not political statements. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coroner's inquest into influencers' free birth death and birthkeepers' refusal to testify. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stacey Warner-Key, 30, died from a postpartum hemorrhage and cardiac arrest after a free birth at home in Melbourne on September 29, 2025. Emily Lau, known as the authentic birthkeeper, was present during Stacey Warner-Key's home birth and when 000 was called at 4:13 a.m. Stacey Warner-Key's husband Nathan shared a heartbreaking Instagram post announcing her death on October 2025, stating hospital staff were amazing but nothing could be done. A coroner's inquest into Warner-Key's death is proposed for mid-June 2026, with a directions hearing held on May 13, 2026. Emily Lau has refused to provide a statement for the inquest, citing privilege against self-incrimination. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the inquest is proposed for mid-June without a specific date, while Newscomau specifies June 15 to 19, 2026. ABC mentions the interim ban on Emily Lau is pending the outcome of an investigation without a specific end date, while Newscomau states it remains in effect until April 7, 2026. ABC does not mention the possibility of a witness summons being issued for oral evidence, while Newscomau explicitly states counsel proposed this. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teen stabbing incident at Melbourne shopping centre and related crime updates. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 25-year-old woman was stabbed while walking through M-City Shopping Centre on Blackburn Road, Clayton, around 7:30 to 7:50 a.m. on Thursday, 7:30 a.m. per ABC, 7:50 a.m. per Thij. The victim was taken to the Alfred Hospital with upper body injuries and remained in a serious but stable condition on Thursday night. A 16-year-old boy was arrested shortly after the attack at a local medical centre in Clayton. The boy was charged with intentionally causing injury, recklessly causing injury, assaulting someone with a weapon, possessing a controlled weapon, theft, and committing an indictable offence while on bail. The boy was remanded in custody to appear at a children's court at a later date. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the stabbing occurred at 7:30 a.m. while Thij reports 7:50 a.m. Thij mentions the victim was stabbed on her way to work while walking through the centre, while ABC states she was inside the shopping centre. Thij reports the stabbing was a random attack on a stranger, while ABC does not explicitly label it as random. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian cricketer Georgia Volume 50 scores fastest T20 century versus West Indies in series sweep. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Georgia Volume 50 scored the third fastest T20 international century by an Australian woman in a match against West Indies on the 11th of March, 2026, Monday-Tuesday AEDT. Vol's century was achieved in 52 balls during Australia's series sweep of West Indies in St Vincent. Australia won the T20 series against West Indies with a 40-run victory via the DLS method after rain interrupted the West Indies chase at 61 3/10 overs. Vol's knock included 6 sixes and aggressive play against spinners, finishing with 101 runs in the third T20 against West Indies. Sophie Molyneux scored 25 off 12 balls in her first series appearance after returning from back pain. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia approves massive coal seam gas expansion in Queensland until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved a coal seam gas expansion project, Australia Pacific LNG, in Queensland's Sarot and Bowen basins until 2081. The project includes up to 1,695 new gas wells, 1,545 kilometers of gas and water pipelines, and 3 processing facilities. The project is expected to produce about 2,033 petajoules of gas and operate until 2061, with an extension to 2081 for environmental compliance. The project's public environment report estimated 9 tons of CO2 emissions during construction and operation, plus 111 tons from burning the gas. Australia Pacific LNG is a joint venture of ConocoPhillips, Origin Energy, and Sinopec. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 126 environmental conditions, while ABC states over 120 conditions, no exact number. The Guardian mentions 111 tons of CO2 from burning gas, but ABC does not specify this exact figure. The Guardian highlights the project's lifetime emissions as 120 tons, while ABC focuses on construction operation emissions separately, 9 tons. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Testing and reviewing chef's knives for home cooks, focusing on performance, value, and care. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ben Lippitt tested 14 knives over a fortnight for The Guardian, focusing on tasks like dicing shallots, slicing tomatoes, and chopping herbs. The Wusthof Classic Chef Knife, 20 centimeters, was named the best overall chef's knife by Ben Lippitt in both articles. Victorinox Fibrox Chef's Knife, 20 centimeters, was selected as the best budget knife, priced at £43. Helen Simmons, a knife specialist, advised against cutting stones, bones, or frozen food to preserve knife quality. No dishwasher use was recommended for knives by Helen Simmons in both articles. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Wusthof Classic Chef Knife is priced at £137.11, but this detail is not explicitly tied to Article 1's headline and appears to be sourced from Article 2. Article 1 emphasizes the importance of handle style and blade geometry in detail, while Article 2 does not discuss these factors beyond the testing process. Article 1 provides specific recommendations for multiple knives, e.g., Sabatier, Robert Welsh, Blenheim Forge, beyond the Wusthof and Victorinox, whereas Article 2 only highlights these 2 knives. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Leadership crisis and potential spill in Victorian Labour Party ahead of 2024 election. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jacinta Allan is Victorian Premier and faces leadership spill speculation ahead of the November 2024 state election. Her net approval rating is -37%, Demos AU poll in Herald Sun, and 69% of coalition voters would direct preferences to One Nation over Labour, Redbridge survey for Australian Financial Review. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll, Right faction, and Transport Infrastructure Minister Gabrielle Williams, Left faction, are the most likely leadership contenders. Allan became Victorian Premier in September 2023 after succeeding Daniel Andrews. Labour's 2023 state election result was better than expected, temporarily easing leadership pressure on Allan. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports a grouping of socialist left MPs within the southeast are driving the push for a leadership change, but these MPs deny it. The Age says a factional chief offered the view that anyone other than Allan would lead the party to a better result, while ABC states no one has suggested anyone was counting numbers. The Guardian claims a push for a leadership change is underway with more than a dozen sources confirming it, but ABC says no one has approached ministers to canvass a change. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran escalation over Strait of Hormuz and energy infrastructure threats in Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump gave Iran a 48-hour deadline, until 23:44 Greenwich Mean Time on March 25, to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz without threat, or face U.S. strikes on Iran's power plants, per Newscomau, ABC, Guardian, X2, SMH, ABC, X2. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated that if Iran's power plants' infrastructure are targeted, vital infrastructure as well as energy and oil infrastructure across the entire region will be considered legitimate targets and will be irreversibly destroyed, per Newscomau, Guardian, X2, SMH, ABC, X2. Iran's military operational command Qassem Al-Anbiya warned that if the US attacks Iran's power plants, the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed and will not reopen until Iran's destroyed power plants are rebuilt, per Newscomau, ABC, Guardian, X2, SMH. Iran's missiles struck southern Israeli cities Dimona and Orod on March 23 to 24, injuring 200 people, including children, and damaging buildings, per Guardian, X2, SMH, ABC, X2. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to all shipping except vessels not linked to Iran's enemies, US Israel, per Newscomau, Guardian, X2, SMH, ABC, X2. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and SMH report Iranian missiles struck Dimona and Orod, injuring 200 people, but Guardian, X2, initially reported possible deaths, unconfirmed, while SMH noted a 12-year-old boy and 5-year-old girl were in serious condition. No source confirms fatalities. Guardian's Steve Reed stated one missile at Diego Garcia fell short and another was intercepted, while Newscomau and SMH do not mention interception details, only that missiles were fired. ABC reports Lebanese President Aoun accused Israel of preparing a ground invasion in southern Lebanon, but Newscomau and SMH do not mention this specific accusation or framing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Qantas Jetstar reduces NZ flights due to rising jet fuel prices amid global fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jetstar is reducing 12% of flights between Auckland and Sydney, and Auckland and Brisbane from May due to rising jet fuel prices. Jetstar has contacted affected passengers directly, offering most same-day travel alternatives. Air New Zealand also reduced flights earlier this month, March 16 to May 3, citing unprecedented volatility in jet fuel prices due to the Middle East conflict. The Middle East conflict is cited as a primary driver of rising jet fuel prices in both articles. Vietnam Airlines plans to cancel 20-plus domestic flights weekly and suspend 7 domestic routes starting next month due to fuel shortages. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Air New Zealand's reductions were due to unprecedented volatility in jet fuel prices, while Newscomau does not specify the exact reason beyond lower demand or off-peak times. ABC reports Vietnam Airlines will cancel 20-plus domestic flights weekly and suspend 7 routes starting next month, but Newscomau does not mention the 7-route suspension. Newscomau states 55 flights have been cut from Jetstar's schedule, while ABC does not specify the exact number beyond 12% of services. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NFL player Cam Scatterbo's controversial denial of CTE and asthma legitimacy sparks backlash and apology. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Cam Scatterbo, a 24-year-old New York Giants running back, dismissed chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, as an excuse during a Bring the Juice podcast in 2025. Scatterbo also called asthma fake and suggested people should just breathe air during the same interview. CTE is a degenerative brain condition linked to repeated head trauma, marked by abnormal tau protein buildup and symptoms including cognitive decline, mood changes, and dementia. CTE can only be definitively diagnosed posthumously, with studies like a 2017 Boston University study finding evidence in 110 of 111 former NFL players examined. The NFL acknowledged a link between football and CTE in 2016. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Scatterbo called CTE an excuse and agreed with the host before making similar claims about asthma, while Article 2 frames the comments as a tasteless joke without explicitly stating he agreed with the host's framing. Article 1 does not mention Scatterbo's mother's response or her personal anecdotes about asthma, which are included in Article 2. Article 1 does not reference the Giants' lack of public comment on the remarks, which is explicitly noted in Article 2 as part of the backlash context. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Severe flash flooding and dam failure risks in Hawaii's northern Oahu and Maui due to extreme rainfall. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 4,000 people were ordered to evacuate in Waialua and Haliwa, Oahu, due to flooding and dam risks, Guardian, ABC. The Wahiawa Dam on Oahu is at risk of imminent failure with water actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second, Guardian, ABC. Hawaii Governor Josh Green activated the National Guard to respond to flooding, Guardian, ABC. A storm last week dumped heavy rain across Hawaii, leading to catastrophic flooding that washed away roads and homes, Guardian, ABC. A second storm forecasted to bring more rain through the weekend, Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, Guardian, states the evacuation order was issued at 5:35 a.m. on Friday for Waialua and Haliwa, while Article 3, Guardian, does not specify the exact time but mentions orders for 5,500 people. Article 1, Guardian, mentions the shelter at Waialua High School lost power and had to be evacuated, but Article 2, ABC, does not mention this detail. Article 3, Guardian, reports 5,500 people were under evacuation orders, while Articles 1 and 2, Guardian and ABC, report 4,000 plus people. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Amazon's Jury Duty TV hoax series and its second season, Company Retreat, featuring unsuspecting participants. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The original Jury Duty series, 2023, featured Ronald Gladden as the unsuspecting participant who believed he was part of a courtroom documentary. Jury Duty won a Peabody Award for its portrayal of reality television's positive impact on participants. Season 2, titled Company Retreat, was announced with Anthony Norman as the lead participant, hired via Craigslist for a hot sauce company retreat. Over 10,000 people applied for the second season's role through Craigslist, with vetting for traits like kindness and empathy. Anthony Norman received a $150,000 cash prize in Season 2, up from $100,000 in Season 1. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Anthony Norman received a $150,000 prize in Season 2, while Article 2 does not specify the exact amount but mentions it is chump change for Amazon and implies it may differ from Season 1's $100,000. Article 1 describes the second season's celebrity cameo as brilliantly pitched so as to just be believable, while Article 2 does not mention the cameo's integration or believability. Article 1 emphasizes the show's warmth and genuine relationships, whereas Article 2 focuses on Norman's boredom and the show's increasingly shocking or absurd pranks. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.